for joining the event. We're thrilled to be here as TPXimpact and to welcome the wonderful UNICEF UK team. It's been a turbulent time for the not-for-profit sector as we've navigated the pandemic and adapted our organisational focus to better respond to this fast-changing landscape. At UNICEF UK, they've been on a journey of change as they've restructured their organisation to meet the needs of their future ambitions. With this came an opportunity to rethink ways of working and the cultural and strategic shifts that might be needed. We're here to share the journey of co-creating new ways of leading, planning and delivering work in a newly formed public engagement directorate. We'll share our key learnings and we hope these insights will prove helpful for you and your organisations. We'll all be online during the event, so please use the chat function. But before we start, we'd like to open with a question, so you should see that on screen right now, and then we're going to come back to this at the live Q&A at the very end, so it should be on screen now. Right, I'm going to come to Louise first. For a bit of context and scene setting, can you please give us a quick summary of the journey UNICEF UK have been on, which led you to the point of this Agile transformation project?
Thanks, Lou. So in terms of a bit of a context, as an organisation, we have actually seen a number of years of plateauing in our performance. And then in fact, actually 2 record-breaking years in 2020 and 2021 in terms of our fundraising income. However, despite that amazing income growth, what we weren't seeing is our return for children going up. We weren't where we wanted to be. And we measure that in lots of different ways. So indicators that lots of people are sort of familiar with in terms of our SORP rate or statement of recommended practice, but also internal measures like our contribution rate, which are very similar, but essentially a return on investment for our expenditure and our income for children. So that ultimately led to a decision by the board and the executive team to restructure to find efficiencies in our staffing costs. So when we compared our staffing costs to our global colleagues, so UNICEF UK is part of a global family. So when we compared ourselves to other national committees, or in fact other to similar sized organisations within the UK, what we found is our ratio of staffing costs to income and impact wasn't quite as where we wanted it to be. So it's worth saying alongside all of that, we had seen significant changes with the impact of COVID and of course the ever-changing sector we worked in. So it's worth saying the restructure became a thing to focus on. As the restructure progressed, what became clear was not only would we need to change how we work to be able to deliver more with less people, but also there was an opportunity for us to try and work differently to drive better outcomes. So things like updated and more refined tools, processes to help us, but also around our culture and governance. But also became clear actually is as we formed this new directorate, and when I say new directorate, I mean that we formed a new directorate called Public Engagement, which was the development and creation of a new directorate from multiple teams, such as our communications team, our individual giving teams, brand teams, and things like that, that actually we would need a new strategic framework. And it was really important that we framed our business in a challenge and the outcomes we needed more holistically, beyond actually just trying to find new ways of working and trying to find new efficiencies. So we went through a tender process to appoint the right partner, and we chose TPXimpact, which brought together partners who had collaborated with us previously, but also those who could bring together additional skills and expertise that we didn't have at UNICEF UK, and actually also those expertise from other sectors, and they had been managing organisational change and transformational projects as well.
Thank you, Louise. Thinking about, I guess, that complex myriad of kind of sector macro challenges, and then, ultimately what UNICEF UK were trying to achieve. It's a big challenge that was sort of presented throughout the process. So, Rich, it'd be great to hear what was our approach and why did we think that would be right for the exact challenges Louise has just talked about that they were experiencing at UNICEF UK.
Thanks for that, Lou, and thanks for the context, Louise. So the biggest thing coming into UNICEF was about actually taking out what other sectors were doing. A lot of people get distracted by guilds and chapters and tribes and squad models and scaled agile and all these really cool things that work for some sectors, particularly tech, but they're actually not proven to be sustainable in other sectors. So a big part of it was actually going in and figuring out how UNICEF worked and doing it alongside everyone at UNICEF UK as well. So we need to understand how they actually operated, how they made decisions, worked together and planned. This is all about moving to new ways of working. So it wasn't just about focusing on how people worked, but also how you govern and strategize. We mostly focused on the strategy, which was a big part, especially into the governance, We're looking at data and tech as examples as well. So we split the work into 3 parts, which is quite fun. We focused on leadership and strategy, one focusing on the delivery of projects, and then the governance was kind of the thread that brought it all together, which is quite nice. The reasons that we went strategy, delivery, and governance all at once is because it's very difficult tackling one in isolation. Often, if you create a modern or agile delivery team, it'll butt up against traditional governance. This team wants to work fast. Traditional governance works a little bit slow to different metrics and different types of scales. If we governed in modern ways without a good and nimble strategy, you're actually governing against an inflexible framework to make decisions against, which is tough. If we govern in modern ways, the strategy we're governing against won't be fit for purpose to enable quick and clear decision making. If we deliver in modern ways without how we plan and prioritize in that strategy space, the teams are going to be running efficiently and effectively, but they'll be slowed down by processes of prioritization, which is quite difficult. So to understand all these different facets, we conducted a rapid discovery over about 6 weeks using 6 pillars of a modern organization. One being around what UNICEF value and how they behave, another being around how they work within their ecosystem, so their users and audiences, how well UNICEF structure themselves to flexibly adapt, and that kind of leads into how we then set up empowered multidisciplinary teams. Another pillar is around how we make devolved decisions and share accountability, and then another around leadership styles, so how are we actually fostering an empowered and high-performing culture. While we were doing this kind of top-down and quite wide review, we were also detailing how they actually delivered projects in the blueprint. That meant that we had a bottom-up understanding of how the organization worked, but then we had a top-down view of kind of the macro parts of how we could move them into a modern organization. What we wanted to do with the project was work in a way that actually lived the UNICEF UK values. We wanted to demonstrate those modern ways of working from the outset, working in the open, embracing employee needs, and putting supporters at the center of what we were doing. Throughout the discovery, we were designing things as well. So we weren't just doing it one stage after the other. We were working in parallel quite a lot, which was delightful. Everyone else is going to actually tell you more about how we went about designing each of these phases. But towards the end of it, we ended up doing aligned new ways of working and principles, a new strategic framework for public engagement, so they could actually start prioritizing around outcomes, a new process for strategy and planning. This was quite important because UNICEF UK work in quite an ever-changing environment. So it was about trying to use the changing environment to our advantage, which is quite fun. And a new way to govern throughout this, including, obviously, and the biggest part was delivering projects in a new way. Once we got those designs out, we're about to go into the next phase of actually testing these and iterating these throughout. Stay tuned for more information on that. Back to you, Lou.
Amazing. Thank you, Rich. Yes, more coming on what we're doing in the real world. So hopefully what you've taken there is, it was important for us to tackle sort of multiple work streams and the different pillars and enablers of thinking about how UNICEF UK might transform. So knowing that we've got sort of ways of working, but actually the importance of the planning and strategic framework. Sabrina, can you tell us how we co-created the new framework and how it was, and I guess continues to be implemented throughout the organisation?
Of course. So through sessions designed and facilitated by TPXimpact, we firstly brought together our newly formed leadership group, which included representatives from marketing, communications, strategy and information teams. So we firstly spent some time sharing our new remits, responsibilities and expectations from each other. So we had a common understanding of each other and devised the principles we'd use to guide our decision making. Next, we started to unpack a strategic framework canvas to ensure that as we go forward, we're collectively focused on the same goals. We then spent a chunk of time really exploring our purpose, vision and mission. So asking ourselves why we exist together, so our purpose, the difference we'll create from realizing our purpose, our vision, and how we would deliver our vision, our mission. So what I really liked about this process was that it was very iterative. So imagine post-it notes galore. At each iteration, TPXimpact helped us to focus on what resonated most strongly to us, but also to really question and challenge ourselves too. They also helped us to meaningfully engage the wider directorate in the conversation to make sure what we ended up with resonated with everyone. And What we've got now is some wording that has very clear meaning for us. Our next chunk of time was spent thinking about how our mission will be delivered, so our strategic outcome headlines. Here we identified the broad themes that help us to organise our data, resources and work. So we had lots of scratchy head moments here as we collectively thought about ways that we could divide what we do. We tested out our suggestions by plotting what we currently do against it to see if it would work in practice. And again, lots of iteration happening to get us to something that works for us. We have known for a long time that we want to be audience-led, but we've really struggled to embed this in our practice. So this process has helped us to do that. Once we had our strategic outcomes, we started to think about the different trade-offs that we make. So first step, getting them all out in the open. So yep, lots more post-it notes, and thinking about how we wanted to prioritize. We did a number of ranking exercises here, so all of public engagement's leadership perspectives could be considered, and we ended up with some clear guide rails to use in our future decision making. We know it's going to take a little time to fully pivot to this, but we're clear on how we're making these decisions now and where it is we want to be. So it didn't stop there. As Rich says, we TPXimpact brought value to this project by bringing together the strategic framework and the operational delivery process, and thinking about how all of this works together through a responsive planning cycle. And this has really created an ideal for us to aim for. We are still in the early stages of implementation. We are starting to socialise this strategic framework with the directorate and our agencies, and we'll be doing a workshop this week to unpack our strategic outcomes further. So this, we want to be clear about what we mean for each of them, what's the change we're hoping to create by them, and most crucially, how we're going to measure its success.
Amazing. And yeah, absolutely how we're going to measure success, because everything that we spoke to UNICEF about was kind of evidence-based decision making, like making sure that we're doing the right thing that is going to get you closer to achieving the goals. Now, ideally, we'd want to be able to start working in a new way as soon as possible. So, Kathy, were there any instances of being able to start planning in the new way before we'd actually finalise the approach?
Hi. Yes, so we did manage to implement bits and bobs as we designed them, and that was great because we could feed the learnings back into development of the final product. I have to admit, it was a bit chaotic at times, a bit of a juggling act, but it was really good in terms of making sure that what we produced was really fit for our specific purpose, and we managed to make our design work respond to the specific issues that were coming up live. And I think that strengthened the kind of authenticity of the bottom-up approach that Rich mentioned before. Also, of course, gotta say, we were tight to deadline, as we always are. So implementing as we went along was one of the only ways we could keep our planning more or less on track. So by using the new work straight away. So we did run the collaborative theming process immediately after we designed it, and that represented a completely new approach to planning for us, a new angle. And we did get some really important learnings from that experience about how we're going to need to help other teams get on board with this new approach to planning, because we were designing a new approach to planning in one directorate that we needed other teams to be able to fit into as well. So what we ended up doing the first time was a bit of a hybrid approach. And I think that's like a key learning alert, is if you're going to develop and implement it once, I think you're going to have to be okay with compromise. And that's something we had to accept. Another thing we road tested was our new prioritization metrics. That went really well and was great practice. I'm really glad we did it at the same time as developing this and at the same time as trying to onboard people, because it did mean that we ended up with stakeholders and staff from the Public Engagement Directorate using these new metrics and explaining them to other people in the organisation and defending them. So we kind of managed to make champions of our stakeholders really early in the process. So I thought that was really useful. We did have a couple of challenges in terms of keeping all our stakeholders up to date with where we were. We had a lot going on, so there was quite a lot of jumping about. One thing we did to help them with that was we really doubled down on communicating the progress to our stakeholders. So we dragged out a process map in most catch-ups with big, you are here points on that map to keep people on track. And also, obviously, because we were running strategy and planning work streams and campaign development work streams in parallel, then also implementing some of the new work straight away, there was so much going on for people that one thing I'm also really glad that TPXimpact did for us was we had a session where we brought together the planning and the campaign development work streams as early as possible in the process. I think Mikey's going to talk some more about that, but that was a great single point in the process where I think people started seeing everything come together at once, which was good. Yeah, so it was chaos, but it was great.
Nothing like effective chaos to keep UNICEF UK on the journey. And like you mentioned, Kathy, sort of people knowing what's going on, having visibility is a great example is people feeling part of the journey. So coming back to you, Louise, how did the wider organisation engage with the journey and the project that you were leading within the Public Engagement Directorate?
No, so absolutely. So this was a really big project for us. After the back of a restructure, creating new ways of working is a big thing for us as an organisation. So it was really important that engagement happened at all levels, given the size of the ambition. So with our executive director, our exec team, and senior leadership team, we needed to give focused time to ensure that engagement. And then specifically from the execs, we needed to recognise that this was a culture shift, and actually that could only happen with their buy-in. So with them, we had specific workshops, both actually with exec and SLT, in fact, and one-to-one interviews at the start of the project to really understand where we were at, but also understand where they wanted to be as well. One important workshop was defining the ambition for UNICEF UK, like Rich mentioned, about being a responsive organisation. So facilitating the discussion about our ambition, and this alongside the discovery work helped us to understand where we were, where we wanted to be, and actually how big that gap was. With the wider organisation and other teams, we involved them in the journey, and that was so important. We had lots of intentional communications, things like our fortnightly show and tells, our all-colleague staff briefings, staff email updates, using our internal platforms such as Workspace, but also making sure that the communications were continuously open between us and all the teams, and also with senior leaders as well. We worked out in the open, which is probably a really sad thing to say. It's not something that we always do or always have done at UNICEF UK, so that people actually felt they were part of the work and actually could see real-time progress, but also how they were influencing their work as well. Another thing that helped was when people joined the sessions, they not only felt they were contributing to the end product or process, but they also learned from the experience. TPXimpact worked in a way that actually we were hoping to change ourselves at UNICEF UK, and so led us by example, actually, which was one of the most helpful things when being part of the project. People felt engaged and excited, and actually therefore truly understood the potential of the work.
Amazing, thank you. And yeah, people being on the journey, seeing what's happening is such a crucial part of the project. So we've spoken a bit about the sort of high level, what are we trying to achieve? We've spoke about the sort of responsive organisation and the planning and strategic frameworks. Now's time to get into a bit more detail of the ways of working and actually delivering projects in the new world, in the new way within the public engagement team. So what did co-designing new ways of working look like, Mikey, for UNICEF?
Thanks, Lou. So I suppose from the beginning of this, we were very conscious that we didn't want to just make some slides that say, this is how you work now, and hand them over at the end of the project, because effectively that just wouldn't drive meaningful change. We wanted the UNICEF team to feel ownership, we wanted to get excited, and we wanted them to have the confidence to work in a new way when we're gone. So at the very start of the project, we took a conscious decision to follow a co-design process, where those who would be responsible for delivering campaigns in the future would actually be the ones that are responsible for designing it. That, I suppose, not only changed the role of the client, but also changed the role that TPXimpact played in the project. Instead of a traditional consultancy role, we acted more as a guide through the process. So we provided structure, frameworks, and challenge to direct conversation. But ultimately, the UNICEF team owned the conversation and the direction of travel into these ways of working. One of the main ways we brought this approach to life was through co-design sessions. So very early on, we established a design group that had representatives from teams across public engagement that would be involved in delivering campaigns in the future. Each week, we'd hold a session with this group, and there'd be a particular topic for that week. Topics would be things like process, governance, rhythms, roles, effectively the different layers of the new ways of working that we were trying to design. The TPXimpact team would bring some structure to these sessions, and we might bring some good practice examples. But what we'd really be there to do is work with the UNICEF team to see what would work for them in their context. For example, in one session, we brought a list of roles that you might traditionally have on an Agile marketing team. We then discussed these roles with the UNICEF team. We agreed which ones would be relevant to them, but importantly, which ones weren't. So really, we were looking to bespoke it to UNICEF and make sure it would work for them. And after all these sessions, we were able to take the inputs, and in the background, we'd feed them into what we call a service blueprint. And that's a map that outlines how public engagement will work together in the future to deliver these campaigns. Conscious that there's more people in UNICEF UK and public engagement than were in that design group, we were proactively taking a lot of these outputs from the group to teams across public engagement for check and challenge. We wanted to make sure that we designed something that had real meaningful impact. So we were getting input and scrutiny from as wide a range of staff as possible. The final piece of this co-design puzzle is the proof of concept. And that's really what we're in the process of doing now. So at the moment, we're working with the UNICEF team to test out the new ways of working that we've designed. That includes the roles that we've designed, the process that we've designed, how governance will work, how rhythms will work, how people will work together across teams to deliver a campaign. In doing so, we hope to understand what parts of this are actually going to work and the extent to which it will drive the benefits that UNICEF UK hope to achieve. The output of that means that we'll be able to take some learnings and drive them back into the design. So we're continuously learning and iterating like that.
Amazing, thank you, Mikey. And yeah, one of the sort of core principles of the things that we've been talking about as we've been on the journey with UNICEF Key is around sort of that iterative circle and cycle of driving insight and changes and being okay with not having perfection, because things change, the world changes, and we need to sort of adapt with that. So like Mikey said, you know, a lot of what we were doing was co-creation and making sure that UNICEF and as many stakeholders were part of that journey as possible. So Lucy, how was the experience of being like a really key stakeholder in the work stream of co-designing the new ways of working?
Yeah, thanks, Lou. So co-designing and collaboration was such a key thing for us. As you've heard already, we had just been through quite a tough restructure. So the project, and especially the weekly design sessions Mikey was talking about, were a great opportunity to come together as a new directorate and do some quite high-level thinking, while also co-developing some really practical tools for how we could work together as a newly formed team. So for example, we agreed our ways of working principles quite early on in the process. Obviously, everyone has different views on what these should be. We had people like me coming from a fundraising background, we had creatives, we had strategists, a whole load of different skills and perspectives in the room. And TPXimpact facilitated the conversations to make sure that everyone was heard. And then we'd get to vote on our favourite ideas or priorities. There was lots of discussion throughout and some healthy debates about the directions we wanted to go in. And it really helped having that neutral party in the room to keep us on track and always bring us back actually to our objective, which was a shared objective of making UNICEF UK a more efficient organisation. And TPXimpact were there in the room to really help read the room as well. They could take a step back and say, right, on this particular area, everyone seems broadly happy and aligned, let's move on. Or occasionally, still a lot of debate happening here. So what we'll do is we'll pick this back up next week until we reach a kind of agreement. So another thing that we did in design sessions that worked really well was being able to share how we do things already and how we could improve on that. So everyone had the opportunity to feed into how we currently planned and delivered our activity and how we could build on that as part of this new way of working. Actually going through existing processes step by step gave everyone the chance to raise where their particular pain points were, so we could address those in the room. So the head of supported care, for example, will have a different pain point to the head of creative, but all being in one room meant we could map this out and address the challenges. It was so important that everyone was heard. We used Miro board, which actually was probably a benefit of doing this remotely, because we always had a record of the post-it notes, and we could go back and revisit the virtual post-it wall at any time. And the other thing that worked really well was the iterative approach, which you have heard about already as well. So we would spend a design session going through something such as how we want to plan a campaign. There'd be lots of discussion at the time. TPXimpact would then go away, write it up, and the following week present it back to us and say, this is what we heard you say. And having had some time and space, we could then look at it with fresh eyes and stretch and build upon it. Lastly, as Louise mentioned, there was lots of collaboration at heads and directors level, but we wanted to make sure other levels of the organisation were involved. So we had the regular show and tells for the whole organisation. We also held a design session for managers so they could feed into the project in a really active and collaborative way as well. What this all means is that now we're embarking on our proof of concept project that Mikey mentioned. We're not having to explain to everyone from scratch what it is we're doing and why. There's already a shared language and common understanding, and essentially we've got that buy-in, which makes rolling it out much easier. So co-designing and collaboration, it does take time up front. We spent a lot of hours in those Miro boards talking, adding post-it notes, voting. But what it means is not only do you get the better outcome, but it's more likely to stick because people have been involved and listened to. So I would really recommend this approach if you're looking to change something in your organisation. Thanks.
Amazing, thank you, Lucy. Yeah, making it stick, right, is something that's super important with the stuff like this, which is why working out in the open, having visibility of what's going on, and inviting people to be part of that. And as Mikey mentioned, you know, our role as TPXimpact was to be the objective kind of partner, support and facilitate the process, challenge you where we needed to. There is a unique role in a project like this where you have total visibility of what's going on, and that is where the amazing project delivery lead like Kat comes in. So Kat, it would be amazing to hear what were some of your key takeouts from the way we approached and delivered and worked alongside UNICEF as someone who had unique visibility of everything that was going on.
Thanks, Lou. It's in fact indeed a privilege in many ways to actually be able to have visibility over everything, and also create the conditions for the teams to work. And I was in a very privileged position to work with amazing people. So at TPXimpact, one of our core values is to lead by example. And so we try to do this by building capabilities within the team through the exposure and engagement to our internal ceremonies and ways of working. So from day one, we just invited the key people to join in and to make sure they felt involved, they understood why we were working this way, but also they contributed when they started to feel comfortable with. The nature of this project was quite rooted in the ways of working, so we really had to take UNICEF team on a journey with us to understand how we communicate and share progress, how we do decision making, how do we embrace failure, and how we take those learnings and that fit into the next sprint to really make it better and adopt the Agile principles to suit the working conditions we wanted to achieve. So constantly iterating and changing when that needs to be. The team was great in making the time to join our ceremonies and in engaging and participating. It really felt like we were able to build a very solid relationship of trust with every single UNICEF colleague, and we were open and honest to talk about the work and problem solve it together. So we tried to keep it no secrets. We would planning together, we would do all the ceremonies together. We'll make sure that everything was embedded in our ways of working. And some of our biggest highlights were seeing the UNICEF team confident and ready to present at the show and tell every 2 weeks, and the appreciation we all showed for each other throughout the project and at the end of the project retro. So it really felt like a true partnership, and we were working with colleagues and not just for the client, which is just fantastic. It's really I feel very proud of that in a true Agile way. So we approached the project in our normal ways of working, so setting our goals for each sprint and key activities for each of us to work. And again, by having that visibility of having a whole project plan laid out, it was very easy for us to identify risks and opportunities, communicating progress, but also quickly be able to pivot if something dramatic happened, which can often happen. Internal things happen, external things can happen, and we had to pivot a project at a moment where there was already a campaign in place and we can work on it. So we pivoted the best way that we could to make sure there was still value out of the work that we were doing. And it actually worked very well because we were able to understand better the context of the organization, and with UNICEF deliver a much more robust plan for the future, with clear direction and actions to take in, so we could test in the new year with a proof of concept. Last but not least, our retrospectives were a very good space again for us to build a lot of trust, to be open and honest with each other, but also to collectively reflect on what we did, identify key challenges, and address them. So we were very, our team, not just as a multidisciplinary team we are at TPXimpact, but also as a blended team with UNICEF, were really able to sort of come together and gel very well and be able to work really towards the main goals of this project. And that was just, again, fantastic, because it was such diversity of knowledge and skill sets, and at the end it actually made my job much easier when it comes to creating the conditions for the team to deliver a successful project, which it turned out to be so well. So thank you everyone, and thanks Lou.
Amazing, thank you, Kat. You made that all sound so simple, and that 14 weeks was, yeah, a lot of hard work from everyone involved. So we're gonna, hopefully you can see everyone on screen. Gonna do a bit of a whistle-stop tour around people's key takeouts, you know, from your perspective, whether that's personally or for your organisation. So I'm coming to Rich first. What were your what was your takeout?
Nice, thanks, Lou. Mine was actually when we were creating the strategic framework for public engagement. We do it like a bottom-up, top-down approach. So during show and tells, we had all of public engagement there. We got their ideas and like, what is the vision? What is the purpose? What's the mission? And using those ideas, the leadership team then actually went through and shaped it all. So it's kind of going, what does everyone else think? What's the employee needs and desires? Leadership then structured that. And then we actually went back to the staff and like voted on options, which was quite cool. So it was like coming up, coming back down. So everyone was playing a different role in the process, which was quite nice. And that kind of lives by what we were saying before around like living the values quite early on during the project. So we want to be employee-led, we want to be audience-led, we want to empower people to make decisions. And so during that process of creation, we actually did that, which was really nice for everyone to see.
Amazing, thank you. Lucy.
Yeah, so my key takeaway, I think, is the confidence that the process gave me. So working on the project gave me confidence to start adopting some of the ways of working right away. So we'd agreed them, I understood them, so I was sort of like, why wait? Things like empowering my team for localized decision making rather than the lengthy sign-off chains we were used to. I didn't need to wait for the green light to start doing that, because I'd sat in sessions with my director, my deputy executive director, and the rest of the directorate, where we'd agreed that this is how we should be working. So even before we'd officially tested the new way of working and rolled it out, we could start to feel the benefits right away. And that's because I'd been involved in the project throughout, so I had the knowledge and the confidence to get started.
Amazing, thank you. Kathy.
Yeah, I think my answer is quite similar to Lucy's, actually. I think there's individual confidence, but also because we did a lot of making decisions and solving problems and like discussing issues together as a leadership team, this process actually really helped us forge those relationships really quickly within a new directorate. And some of our leaders in that directorate maybe hadn't worked so closely together, but actually the process itself really helped people to get to know each other, really helped people to get to know how to work with each other really well. And I think that's laid the foundations for a much easier transition onwards for us. So that's been a really good takeout for me.
Brilliant, thank you. Yeah, and like you say, anyone on the beginning of a new journey of coming together as a team, like having that trust and professional and personal trust is super important. Mikey.
Yes, not to repeat what's already been repeated, but I think, yeah, a really big takeaway for me personally from this project was I think the power of breaking down barriers, particularly those that you might normally see between consultants and clients. This is a really good example of titles being left at the door and everyone just kind of coming together to drive meaningful change. There's a lot of laughs, a lot of honest conversations, and I honestly don't think without the relationships that we formed, we would have been able to get quite as far as we managed to do in the time period we had. So yeah, I think that for me, it's just all the relationships.
And if we ever give anyone access to the behind the scenes footage of this, testament to our relationship of being able to enjoy the trust and fun that we've had along the way as we've navigated all the challenges and curveballs. Sabrina, I love your reflection around iteration.
So at the risk of repeating again, for me, it's the power of iteration. So I thought it was really powerful for us to shape ideas together, replay them after a week, challenge them again, like ask ourselves, does this really still resonate? If not, why not? And then iterate again.
Definitely. And yeah, not being afraid to find something that isn't perfect and continue to build on it as you go. Louise.
So I think my key takeaway was really about getting people to be part of the change. I think we've all talked about that actually in some form today, and actually being on the journey from the very beginning. So working out in the open, being brave to show our work in progress, so that actually people are part of that journey. And I think, you know, as standard, we often can be focusing on sharing our work when it's sort of in that final draft stage. When we say final draft, being actually we're just looking for a few comments, but actually by showing work in progress, we can get feedback on it in real time, and I think that's incredibly helpful. I think if I'm allowed a second one, I would say for me it was around getting leaders to come to the work rather than the work come to them, and being brave and firm in that. So actually leaders didn't get separate sessions all the time. They actually were being part of the conversations with all colleagues, because actually all voices were really important. So I'd say that as well.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you, Louise. And yeah, that was such a valuable tool in terms of like everyone being on the journey, but it's the same journey experience for everyone by coming to what's going on. Over to you, Kat, on your takeout. Thank you.
I think without trying to repeat what everyone said, because all of those were valuable learnings and key takeouts, but is the trust that we build again from day one. It was very important, and is not easy when someone externally comes in and says, this is how we can work together and come on a journey with us. So they were ready to embrace this new way of working and ready to embrace the unknowns, which was amazing. And also they were just not scared to also voice their concerns and to be a voice in the group rather than just be us talking. So that was the most, that was the biggest takeaway.
Amazing, thank you, Kat. Yes, making time for everyone to have the voice in the situation. So final question before we go to our live Q&A. Coming to you first, Sabrina, what would you say to another not-for-profit about to embark on a project or programme of change like this?
So I would say trust in the process. So for me, it felt quite uncertain, and I didn't know what to expect in those first few weeks, but really sort of trusted in the process, in these new ways of working. And then after like maybe 3 or so weeks, it all started coming together. You can really sort of see how it built together and like why these things were being done in the way that they were being done.
Trust in the process and trust in the unknown. Even, you know, you have to sort of respect that we're on a journey together. Rich, would love to hear your thoughts to a not-for-profit.
Absolutely. And it's kind of a learning from this project. It's like face up to the bad things happening in the organisation. I think UNICEF took some really big messages like on the chin really well and moved on from it quite quickly. And like a lot of clients I see often kind of like see something and bury it a little bit. So it's like face up to the big things. You had to shift way more fast, which was really nice to see within this project, and recommend others to do the same.
Definitely, don't be afraid to confront them, because they are the things that will come back time and time again. Louise, what were your thoughts to another organisation?
So mine actually is sort of linked to Rich's. So it's actually being clear on the problem you're trying to really solve. And when you think you're clear on it, spend some more time with your chosen partner, if you have one, to unpick it even more. So by knowing your warts and all, and it does feel ugly at times, you know where you're trying to move from. So we actually had a really helpful session right at the beginning with a few of the key exec team that actually helped us define our problem statement. And I think that really set us up for success, but also really engaged our senior leaders on the situation we were trying to move forward from. So they understood the problem clearly, so that actually when we work through solutions and new processes and things like that, they understood why we were doing it. I think that was a really helpful one.
Amazing, thank you. And I'm going to hand over to Lucy to wrap up the final question.
Sure. So from my perspective, just make time for this. I think if your role is anything like mine, you're always busy fighting fires and dealing with urgent things that come your way. So it is hard to carve out time. But if you want to change your organization, it's so important to prioritize something like this, because it's what really will have the biggest impact on your organization in the longer term. So do make time for it.
Amazing, thank you. Yeah, what you're getting out is what you're able to give it energy, time, and prioritize it, right? If it is a big problem, like you said, Louise, for the organisation, and everyone's clear on that, then that is a priority for everyone. So thank you all to the wonderful speakers, the Fundraising Everywhere team. Hopefully we've had lots of questions throughout this, and so we are now going to be live for some more questions. Hi everyone, thank you so much for coming along today. Great to see you all saying hello and questions in the chat. I would love to welcome our panelists onto screen with me now. Come on in from backstage. We have been weirdly watching ourselves like ahead of you as you've been watching, which is very surreal experience, but amazing. You'll see there's a few of us. We've got a few people short, so due to illness, and of course, it will come as no surprise that it's all hands on deck for the team at UNICEF as they respond to the conflict in the Ukraine. So some of the team can't make it, but we're here. We would actually love to jump to the poll. I saw quite a few people have responded to this, so we could bring that up on screen. Let's take a look at how everyone responded. Okay, so what's the biggest change your organisation has had to make in the last 2 years? Unsurprisingly, actually, it is organisational structure. So, Louise, is this what you would have expected to have seen from other members of the sector?
Thanks, Stu. Honestly, yes, it doesn't surprise me at all. That said, I almost think all of these things could have been considered the biggest change because so much has happened. It's been an unprecedented 2 years, and there's been so much change. And so for me, you know, organizational structures are changing our ways of working, and our ways of working are changing our organizational structures. And so from my point of view, almost, I'm not surprised, but equally it could have almost been any of those things given how things have been the last period of time.
Yeah, definitely. And I think one of the things that we were reflecting on is there's sort of the force of feeling like you have no choice but to make changes, but also using that sort of I guess as a platform for change, like you say, and being that catalyst. Okay, I have another question from the audience. Thank you all. I can see them all weirdly. I'm seeing you live in the left and also backstage. So from the audience, so how is the proof of concept going? What else have you learned from this? I'm going to come to Lucy first, who is live in the proof of concept with us.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, so how's it going? So we're only a few weeks in, but so far so good. Essentially, from my side, I'm not involved in every question or decision, and that's exactly the same for other heads and directors. And this frees up my time, so I can see how we could run multiple projects like this at the same time to deliver more of the right things quicker. It's about involving the right people at the right time rather than all people at all times. And that was definitely an approach we would kind of defer to because it gives us that false sense of security, but doesn't actually mean we get to the best outcome. So I've had to learn to let go a little bit and trust the rituals and rhythms. And the benefit is, as I said, I'm not involved in everything, but I'm involved at the right times. In hindsight, one thing we could have done differently is to over-resource the pilot project. So this is a trial, and we kind of resourced it at kind of rollout expectations, if that makes sense. So if you're doing this for the first time, assume it's going to take longer, essentially, the first time you kind of road test it. So just watch out for that. But you know, we are able to kind of, not everyone on the project isn't on it at 100% of their time, so we can kind of pivot resource there. So just one to watch out for in terms of resourcing, but it's going well.
Amazing, thank you. Yes, learning by doing, which has been a huge part and thread of everything. I guess, Mikey, from your side, you're sort of, again, a key part of leading the proof of concept charge. Yeah, how's it going, and what else have you taken from this as part of the project?
Thanks, Lou. So yeah, from my perspective, it's been going fantastic so far. We're about halfway through the process, so really in the weeds of it. So far, the team have been assigned a brief to improve one of UNICEF's subscription products. We've got team members around it. Each team member has been briefed with their role. So far, the team have actually started looking at ways at the data that underpins the product and using that data to find ways to improve it. And actually, at the moment, we're about to roll out our first improvement for the product, so we're quite excited about that. There's definitely been some learnings from this. One has been, first of all, the power of autonomy. Lucy was talking about this there, but the team were effectively making most of the decisions, with leaders brought in at crucial stages for oversight and challenge. But the team really retains that autonomy, and I think that's been a really powerful thing, both in terms of, I suppose, making things go quickly, but also, yeah, it's good for the team themselves. There have been some learnings or things that we could improve. So one is about length of times of some of the rhythms that we've been having. And then another one about who needs to be involved at different stages of the process. But again, one of the beauties of working in an agile way means that we can take these learnings, feed them back into the process, and constantly iterate and update how we work. So the team have already pivoted to meet those challenges and have updated or iterated their ways of working in response. So very excited to finish off the last 3 weeks and continue on past that.
Amazing, thank you. And I guess that's the power of having those ceremonies and rituals that help us like reflect regularly and make sure that we're iterating and improving and taking those learnings as we progress. So I have a question from Alan. Have you yet experienced any decision being made in the new and less hierarchical way of working that you have been unhappy about? So I guess I'm going to come to you first, Louise.
I think the answer at the moment is no, and I think that's partly because we're still very early on in the proof of concept, in kind of the work that we've been doing, and we're all still kind of feeling our way through it, to be honest with you. So I'm afraid I don't think, given how early we are in the journey, I have a better answer than that at this point, I'm afraid.
Brilliant, thank you. And actually, I'm going to skip to the next question from Gemma in the chat, and I'm going to come to you, Rich. Any tips and techniques on how to build trust in teams?
Good question. So I think when we first got to UNICEF, there was like a relative unease after like a restructure and things. So we did need to build trust very quickly in what we were doing. And like one of our main techniques was just listening. So for example, when we ran show and tells, we got everyone to be giving lots of insights and inputs. And the very next show and tell, we actually showed them this is the influence your input had on the decision of the strategic framework or the governance or the way of working. So it was like, yes, we're listening to you and this is how it's impacting. And the more they can start seeing, oh yeah, my voice is making a difference, they start getting into a more rhythm of, oh, if I speak up more, they're going to listen to me, and you slowly build trust that way. So it sounds kind of basic, but yeah, just listening and reacting and responding in kind to your people is the easiest way, from my point of view, to build trust in teams.
Amazing, thank you. I'm going to come to Catherine's question. Actually, no, I'm going to start with Kerry because that was first. How did you realise you needed to embark on such a big project? And are other directorates now looking to do the same thing, / is it difficult that this is not organisational wide? So I might come to you first, Louise, on that one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think I mentioned earlier on, sort of in the video, that we had undergone or started going through a organisational wide restructure, and that is really what essentially provoked us thinking up what this piece of work is. We were looking to drive efficiencies in our staffing costs, and ultimately what we got to the place is that we couldn't deliver the work we wanted to at the quality we wanted to with new updated staffing kind of levels without changing how we worked. And so that kind of was the big thing that pushed us into thinking differently. We understood our problem, and at that point realized we needed some additional support in how we might want to look at that. And that's when we essentially went out to find the right partner to deliver the work. In terms of, I guess, other directorates, yes, the answer is yes. People are always keen and are in touch quite regularly about when the next phase of the work is coming along. And I guess linked to that is it difficult not to do organisational wide? We went with the premise that to try and drive organisational change, better to try in a part of the organisation and iterate and develop from there than kind of go a whole hog across the organisation. I stand by that decision. I think, that we made. I think it was the right thing to do, not least because we were off the back of quite a major restructure and quite a big change period. And actually that made this quite a difficult piece of work as well in itself. So, but I guess the challenge is now is how you bring that to other parts of the organisation. And actually, when you do have two different parts of the organisation working partly in different ways, there are some challenges to that. but actually I think it's helped, and it's evolving the teams who haven't been involved in that work, because they're seeing how it's working and they're implementing some of the principles into their everyday work. So they're kind of learning and changing because they see their colleagues doing it as well. So yeah, I think that's probably it from me.
Amazing, thank you. And yes, absolutely. So much of the discussion, I guess, was being actively aware of what the tensions might be when we try to sort of scale this out. And I think Lucy and Mikey maybe nod if you want around sort of the tension we're managing, because other parts of the organisation aren't working in this way. So we're also figuring that out as we move through to make sure that it doesn't sort of hinder progress of trying to embed a new way of working. And I'm like squinting at my screen. I think I saw you nodding. All good there. So coming on to the next question from Catherine, I'm going to come to Rich, because you really sort of led this part of the work stream with Louise, with Kathy and Sabrina. So how did you resolve the issue of planning and delivering needing to be iterative, dynamic and agile against that sort of governance aspect of the organisation that is sort of exists within UNICEF?
Nice. I'll tackle that in like two parts. So on the governance part, we're actually trying it out in the proof of concept right now. So like one of the massive problems of this was like the delivery teams having to send up reports up the chain, hierarchical governance structures. So what we've actually done is changed it into the governance team or designated roles come to delivery. So the way that we run Agile like sprints, so sprint planning, show and tells, stand-ups, retrospectives, this is where the governing groups actually come down into delivery and help shape and guide decisions from there. So like no more reports, for example, it's more about going and seeing the work being done. So in terms of old school governance, I guess, and then iterative delivery, it's about bringing the governance closer to delivery and removing the gap a little bit more. So you're actually using more senior people in the organization in a more robust way. Like they are extraordinarily smart people. They don't just need to read reports. So they're actually helping problem solve now as well. And in terms of planning, it's more about actually empowering the delivery teams to plan. So multidisciplinary teams wrapped around a brief. It used to be that we'd feed in like, you need to do these requirements into these project teams. And so the planning was quite upstream. And now it's going, hey, here's the outcomes we want to achieve. And the team gets to plan and deliver that themselves. So the planning side of it becomes a little bit more high level and outcome based around audiences, so that enables the delivery teams to plan and deliver themselves with that governance coming to delivery. So attacking it a number of different ways. Back to you, Lou.
Brilliant, thank you. And I guess so much of the work that we did in that sort of early discovery phase kind of helped underpin and identify where we might need to tackle those things within the organisation. Coming to a question from Alison Ive, who, yay, good to see you here, Alison. It sounds like a fab process. What are the examples of team rituals or ceremonies that really help to build those relationships? So I guess I'm going to come to our delivery oversight lead person, Kat, to share a bit about that.
Thanks, Lou, and thanks, Alison, for the question. So the main rhythms and rituals that we had throughout the project were, so we have the stand-ups, which is the usual sort of check-in type of session that is quite short, keeping everyone up to date, everyone up to speed, progress on the day or progress of the week. We had a sprint planning. So when we plan our sprint, our goals and our tasks for that 2-week sort of time frame, and we had our retros and the show and tell. So everything was not just with us TPX team internally, but we started bringing alongside a lot of the UNICEF people, so to make sure that not only they could hear and understand the progress and the process and what we were doing, but it could also participate and start bringing their own work as well on that they were working on, where there was particular side bits that were happening that would impact our project, or actually the engagement that we're doing on the project. So that really allowed them to be more confident, to, like Rich was saying, also to have their voices heard and to really feel like they are part of the whole process, and to get their views and their insights and also their input if we had to change something on our plan, if we had to speed up something, or actually we could take a bit longer in the process to deliver something. So that was very, very helpful. And again, creating those conditions for them to feel they're being heard, but also to support them in the delivering of the work. So when we delivered show and tells, we really supported them on the preparation and how to do a show and tell, what, you know, things to say, how do we really tell the narrative and build a narrative and tell a story. So all of that was very important as a sort of like building capabilities with the UNICEF people, but also learning from them as well, how they deliver things, how they do things, and we can incorporate a bit of everything.
Amazing, thank you. And yeah, sort of being that guiding partner along the way, but absolutely it's a shared kind of project and responsibility and accountability, and kind of us all working together and using those ceremonies as the net to sort of discuss them. So Georgie, I saw your note in the chat about what you have implemented at the British Red Cross in the education department. So you've spun up a new strategy, new org design, culture, agile ways of working, including multidisciplinary product squads over the last years, and you've had amazing success and results in terms of like what you've achieved for an outcome versus, I guess, the resource you had in terms of people and money. But for some reason, the success is not something widely understood or accepted by the rest of the organisation. Mikey, what are your sort of reflections on that kind of challenge, despite clearly an amazing success in terms of the implementation?
Yeah, so I think that's a very valid concern or challenge. I mean, often it's quite hard to communicate the progress that something like this makes, because it can be quite hard to explain some of the steps or processes that underpin it. I think so far and to date, one of the ways that we've gotten around this is by having a lot of people involved in the design phase. So people from across the organization, from within public engagement, but also wider UNICEF, were involved in designing the process that now we're testing the proof of concept. And we're constantly, I suppose, doing show and tells to bring people up to speed on our progress. I think that's to some extent helped mitigate that challenge, and it's something that I'm not sure if you're doing this in British Red Cross at the moment, but might be worthwhile thinking about. We have show and tells every 2 weeks to show progress of the proof of concept, how it's doing, what we're learning from it, where we're succeeding, but also where we need to improve. So I'd recommend that as an approach if it's not something you're already doing.
Amazing, thank you, Mikey. Yes, those sort of very public, open to all show and tells are the sort of the epitome of working out in the open, right, and people coming to see what's going on. It feels like really relevant right now based on the situation we're in. So Lucy, when you're in emergency mode at UNICEF UK, how do you prioritise, and is the new approach helping you with that as a team within public engagement?
Yeah, very timely question. We're incredibly busy on the Ukraine appeal right now, as I'm sure some of you on the call are too. The first thing to say is that emergency appeals are the area within UNICEF where we are already the most agile. So we're starting from a good place in that regard, and the new ways of working really align well with that. I'd say the new approach has helped give us even more confidence to remove layers of sign-off, empower delivery teams, and kind of work through a core tight group of individuals to deliver more quickly, which really supports the most important thing in an emergency, which is speed to market. One thing I'd say we've done differently this time, thanks to the project, is that leadership have been really explicit up front that the emergency is priority number one and the objective is income. So every decision being made is through that lens and just gives us that really clear steer to pivot resource away from business as usual, which does mean stopping some things. In the past, we've been guilty of trying to juggle everything, keep it going alongside the emergency, but I think we've been much more focused this time around.
Amazing, thank you. And yeah, it was a very real conversation that we had as part of the proof of concept on Monday, where we could see that some of the team were obviously being pulled into emergency mode, and that absolutely is an organisational priority. So the question we asked ourselves is, what does it mean for the other stuff? What are we trading off in sort of shape of those priorities? It is 1 minute to 2 p.m. and I know this is a lunchtime slot, so people have stuff to do. So a huge thank you all again for taking the time to hear about our work what we've been up to at TPXimpact and with UNICEF UK. A huge thanks to the team on screen and who recorded for being up, for sharing their experience with a view to the wider sector hearing this and hopefully taking something really useful back to your organisations. That's what it's all about. If we haven't got to your question, we will come back to you directly. Lucy, I can see that you've got a question in the chat, which we won't have time for, so please do share your details. Otherwise, we'll try and get back to you on the chat. And then just to wrap up, you'll see a button at the bottom of the page which says register for our next event. And we're going to be hosting another panel talk at the end of March, following on from our taster session at the Third Sector Tech Summit last month. And we're bringing together a wider team to explore the topic of what to think about when embarking on a big tech and change program within your organization. So come and join us. We would love to have you hear our thoughts and experiences, having done a lot of this with amazing organizations in the sector. And that is it. Thank you all. Have a wonderful day.